Good morning, DC. How you doing?
Oh, doing great, Martin. How are you this morning?
Doing well, DC. I'm about to throw you a curveball, literally a curveball. Um, Something I haven't even asked these guys about it yet, but I don't know. You watch much baseball, and if anybody's driving down the road right now, I'm about to ask a baseball question. So hold
Oh,
on. I don't want anybody running off the road. You watch
yeah, I
much?
do watch. I watch a little bit of baseball. Follow Alabama baseball.
I don't watch much baseball and very little MLB baseball. But as of late, there's beginning to be this big, huge movement about netting and extending the netting to protect the fans. Let me ask you this: is this a story that's being blown out of proportion? Is this partially? Are baseball players hitting a lot more foul balls a lot harder than they used to, or are fans coming to the game, sitting on those front rows, and not as in tune potentially as they used to be? Could some of it? And a couple of these people have not been fans that were on their phones, but is this a kind of a distracted driving type of thing? Is this a distracted fan thing going on with baseball, or is it just because I'm like, why all of a sudden over the last couple of years are guys hitting much harder foul balls, or what?
No, I don't think they're hitting any more harder foul balls. I think they just we just know more about it now because every game is on a national television, or somebody has a phone, or somebody has a replay you can see on ESPN where someone gets hit or hurt. A lot of it has to do with being distracted at the game, kids getting hit that can't get out of the way, and parents not blocking the balls. For everyone that gets hit, I'm sure you got three or four that catches the ball, or a parent who saves their child from getting hit because they're in tune. A lot of it has to be distracted. So I think you can blame a lot of it on just being distracted at the game, not paying attention to the foul ball, not watching
The
the
game.
game is fast. It's fast-paced game sometimes, and the ball gets there pretty quickly. If you're a child, you really can't protect yourself. So I think it's just another product of the game, and trying to protect children. I think there's been more children injured than there has been adults.
Yeah, and I look at it and go. I remember I was telling because my kids have not watched a lot of baseball. I was telling my kids, I said that was used to be the reason you sat on the front few rows at a baseball game was so that you could get a foul ball hit in your section. But now it seems to be, like I said, that was a curveball. Something I was just happened to be watching ESPN, and they were making a big story about it. And I thought, is it really that big a story? And has it changed that much, or has it just been that there's just a lot more distraction than what people normally are? All right, DC, let's get back into the conversation. We're gonna kind of do a rapid fire show today. Got several things. I'm gonna ask you some questions about our O line here in a minute, and got a bunch of different angles we can take on that. But there's several stories I'd like to get your input on, and may use some of your comments later on this week. Big news coming out of the weight room at Alabama. A need position. Young man doesn't always translate to the field, but did you see the news about Christian Harris power cleaning 365 pounds?
Yeah, I did. I was really excited. I saw the video late yesterday. Someone had pointed out to me, and just to see that, to me, that is one of the moves that does translate to the field if you can make it do that, because of that explosive nature of that action when you're lifting that kind of weight. And I really believe that we could use. I've said all along, going into this coming year, middle linebacker is going to be one of the places where we're going to need some help. And if he can translate that on the field, then he'll really give us a solid addition to the middle linebacker core. I think it'd be great just to see the young man do that. I mean, when you put it in perspective, of people who are looking at that, there's not a whole lot of football players today that can do that, let alone a freshman who's just coming in to get started. And that to me tells me a little bit more about his commitment off the field, his commitment as a young player coming in for the first time to be ready to do that. A lot of times they have to get up to speed to the weightlifting, because the Alabama lifting program under Scott Cochran is second to none in the nation.
Well, I can tell you that's more than a commitment. That's a lot of hard work that and discipline that follows that commitment. I was telling them earlier in the first quarter, I was one of the top 10 strongest on the team, including all the linemen and all of that when I was here. And my max was like 325, and 365 was reserved for only a handful of guys in the era in which we played. And I know these guys have better nutrition and all of that stuff, but 365 pounds is a lot of weight. And when you look at the linebacker position and you go from how you play linebacker and get blockers off you, especially this is where this translates to most to me, is an inside linebacker has to get those big defensive linemen off of them, have to be able to press and explode through 320, 325 pounds. So hopefully that's going to translate to him on the field.
I hope so. And just another observation is that just a lot of things coming out of the fourth quarter program, the weight and conditioning program in the football team this year just looks to be on tip top of their game and in shape. It looks like they're taking Coach Saban's challenge to get back to Alabama basics to heart. And so I'm glad to see some of the great things I've been heard coming out of the fourth quarter program this summer.
Yeah, and when Saban said Tua needs to get in shape, I thought he was referring more to a mental aspect, but it appears that it translated to both hopefully mentally down the road, but definitely to a physical aspect, as Tua reportedly down and around that 218 to 220 range. What kind of impact could that have on Tua's game?
Oh, I think that's going to be a huge impact. I think people have just been selling that short. I think that's a great story coming out of this. Not only Tua, but the number of players that either lost weight or put on weight, and the amount of weight they've lost or put on has really been good during this offseason. And I think, for example, just translating that into Tua's game, I think he's going to have a lot better quickness. I think he's going to be able to elude the defensive players and just make some cuts and moves and little speed that he didn't have last year. That can really make a difference in his game. He's so good. You add that little burst of speed, quickness to him, or endurance. You're just going to make a difference in his game even greater.
We're going to get to that offensive line conversation a little later on, but before we get to break here, DC, Mark Emmert, leader of the NCAA, coming out and threatening or sending a letter to the legislature of the California, I guess represents the California schools, just because they passed a bill that hadn't gone into law yet, but it's making its way through and looks like it's going to pass, flexing his muscles a little bit, saying that if this bill passes, stays on the books, could prevent future California schools from participating in championship games and tournaments. What are your thoughts on that? And you familiar with what I'm talking about? I guess I should have asked that way first.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I saw the letter yesterday, and I think less of a threat. People have kind of spun it as a threat. I think it was more of an implication. He was implying that if this type of law were to pass, then it could prevent them from playing. And what he's talking about there, this is a image and likeness law, and right now the NCAA has nothing that can process this type of law, and therefore championship games such as the college football playoff, that has already been sold into the future for image and likenesses and that sort of thing. So if a team from a state that has that type of law where the NCAA has to honor it, and then he's saying that could keep that team out of the championship because they would have to exclude any players that already that has to have that type of legal likeness, image, compensation because that has already been sold in the future. So yeah. I mean, it's just the NCAA flexing its muscles, stating. And you got to remember, the NCAA is not this third party. It's not this quote unquote giant organization that's a third party telling everybody what to do. The NCAA is a party of all the members of which the
Right.
the teams are members of, the schools are members of. So they have given over their governing to the NCAA. It's not like they're forcing them. In other words, they have to abide by the rules because that is it's the makeup of all the schools, and it's every school gets a vote, and that's why their Pac-12 is a member of that organization. When you're a member of it, you have to abide by the rules. What they're saying is, hey, we've already sold these rights. We can't do what you're putting us in a position where we can't do it. And if we have to do it, then you'll have to be excluded from those until we get to a place where we can actually honor that type of law.
Yeah, and here's going to become the interesting part. The NCAA, ironically, football is excluded because the college football playoff is outside of that NCAA governance when it comes to their final championship game, the bowls, and the college football playoffs. Here's the question I have for you, DC. Is it possible? What happens? Because I think some other states are going to jump on board with this. I think what you're going to have is NCAA is saying this, and I understand from a legality standpoint, it doesn't go into effect to 2023. Is this alone enough to force the hand? Probably not. But as other states get on board, is the NCAA? Do you see it being forced to maybe speed up its calendar, or at least do something that allows this to be able to happen?
Yeah, it could. I don't see it happening. From a lawyer's perspective, legality, there's too much that has to do. It can't happen overnight. Too much has to be a longer period of time to put something in place like that, based on all the contracts and everything that's already been negotiated with the different television organizations. And so it would have to be a long-range plan. So I don't think we're talking about something overnight. I think just the opposite. I think this is a way to dissuade teams and states who are very passionate about their football teams, whose teams actually have an opportunity to be in the championship game, from passing legislation like California has done. California is always a more liberal state, always out there on the cutting edge, and their teams haven't really been in the college football playoff, so to speak, in that conversation for a while. So I think this is a way to, hey, let's send this letter to them. Let's put everybody on notice in these other places before y'all start making laws that will exclude your teams from the current makeup, the way it's current makeup. And I think we're under a contract with the college football playoff for an extended period of time right now. Then let's don't exclude your team from being that. It's going to take a while. So I think it's just the opposite effect. I think it's going to have a chilling effect on it right now for some of these other states, like South Carolina, Alabama, Oklahoma, who really has teams, Georgia, who has teams that are competing every year to get into the playoff. Ohio, those places, Michigan, those type of states. Hey, the NCAA is flexing the muscle to say, hey, don't y'all pass a law like that right now because we can't deal with it. And that's what I think it's going to have a chilling effect on it, really.
DC, you just said something. I'm going to hold it over, but that would scare me if I was a player who was expecting, based on what you just said, we may be looking at another decade before you get to image and likeness being compensatable from a player standpoint. And if that's the case, I think there's going to be some revolt, uproar. I don't know how, but you bring up a good point. We'll point that out when we come back from break. We're speaking with DC Capstone Report. You can find DC Capstone Report at dccapstonereport.com. Let's get back into our conversation with DC Capstone Report. DC, you mentioned something. You said from a legal standpoint, even though the NCAA, they're posturing, the reality of it is, even with all of their posturing, you think they're going to be limited on how fast they can move to this pay for image and likeness and all of that. How far down the road do you think this is going to be? Because when you said what you said, it made me start thinking, this could be a few years in the making. Now, I will say this: the college football playoffs, it's kind of weird the way the NCAA works. The NCAA can rule players eligible and ineligible, but college football playoff is in the bowl system are not part of the NCAA's governance. All the other major tournaments, I think, fall under the NCAA and their management. So they would the ruling of eligibility, I guess, they would have to be ruled ineligible in the season if they start getting paid. But would they be able to come back and play in the bowl game and in the college football playoff? So just thoughts there.
Well, I think the whole thing, just to kind of drop back and do like a helicopter view of this, the state of California is trying its best to be on the cutting edge here to make a ruling, to make a law that will challenge the image and likeness. That's what they're trying to do. All right. That's really the wrong way to go about this, because as I said before, the NCAA is not some third party out there. It is an entity that's made up of all the managing schools, the partner schools. So in order to change this, it has to come from within the NCAA and go up the chain of the NCAA and all the schools be in favor of it. Because if you're a member of it and all the schools are not in favor of it, it's not something that's going to be. It's not something that's just going to happen. So what the NCAA in the letter is implying that not necessarily they won't be ineligible to play, because it may be that they're not allowed to play in the college football championship game, because that is governed by another agreement that they've already given. The NCAA has voted to give that right over to a CFP committee who runs it, or a bowl committee who runs that. And, the players still have to meet the NCAA guidelines to be eligible to play. Now we see players who are suspended for not passing drug tests and other things, because the NCAA has given that right over to those to police it themselves, but given the rights to the game over to the college football playoff. Well, there's a contract in place. It's a legal contract. It's already been signed. It's already been done. It's through so many times they will negotiate another one. So any time of likeness payment or anything like that has already been negotiated away in this contract. So it's not something that can happen overnight. It'll be something that it's 5 to 7 years down the road when this, unless they just do a renegotiating all at once. What I'm thinking the NCAA is doing is they're posturing. They're making their statement known against California, so that all these other states that are coming behind them to pass a similar law will think twice before they do it. At least they'll have somebody in their group say, "Hey, I don't want our teams to not have a chance to go play the playoffs." Now, is that really going to happen? The world would revolt. If what would you say if they told Alabama they couldn't play in the playoff game? We might have a Southeastern Conference revolt or whatever.
That's right.
But what I'm saying is, it's just the posturing of the NCAA to try to get the word out there that, hey, this is a possibility. Y'all think about this before y'all get there and vote about something. Let's let this go back through and sift through the NCAA. I still think it's another tactic to try to put things off, try to slow things down. So in reality, I think we're still a long ways away. A sports writer tweeted last night, NCAA would never do this. This is just posturing. Well, the NCAA is posturing, so they won't have to do it. And the NCAA is not a third-party entity. I keep coming back to that because it's so important. This is a organization that's made up of all the schools, and it's all the schools who vote who tell the NCAA what to do. They have given over their governing but to the NCAA. And so, yeah, the NCAA can do this and would do this if it means maintaining the status quo right now. And I think it's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think you're as likely possibly to see the revolt of the Power Five out of the NCAA as you are to see them break millions of dollars of contract money that they already have coming in. So it'll be interesting to see what happens down that side. Couple quick questions before we get to the offensive line conversation in the fourth quarter. Jimbo Fisher, did you see the article on Jimbo Fisher? I think this guy, he's never been I've never been a big fan of his, so I understand I may have a little bias, but he left a dumpster fire at Florida State, and now the numbers seem to back that out. Willie Taggart inherited a team that everyone is saying, hey, this is the first team in 36 years that didn't make it to a bowl game, and their current Coburn, their current AD is saying, well, actually, Jimbo Fisher pulled a ripcord last year and went back and got that, that game that had been mentioned. They were 5-6 and had to reschedule La Monroe to get to 6-6 and make it to the bowl game. Their score where they grade the teams on their academic achievement, DC, 922 for the 2017-2018 and 936 for the last 4-year average. At 930, you get suspended. I mean, you get in trouble. You lose practice time, and I mean, it's just crazy. He left an absolute dumpster fire from an academic, discipline, and a talent standpoint. Is Jimbo Fisher getting a pass on the dumpster fire he left at Florida State?
Of course he is. At the time he left, if you go back, there was a couple of articles written, and most people wrote it off thinking it was biased for Florida writers, but there were actually writers who were really good to know the inner workings of the Florida State program. And it was at the time he went to Texas A&M, they were just aghast at, well, why would anybody pay him that kind of money to come to their school after what he had done to Florida State? Jimbo Fisher, he went completely opposite, trying to break the mold from Bobby Bowden to him, trying to change the culture. He offended so many people. He put so many people out of the program. The culture began to change. It took a nosedive. He won with Bobby Bowden's players. The players he was recruiting, changed the style of play. Didn't go over well in Florida. And they started losing recruits to schools, other schools in Florida. Why do you think that teams like South Florida and UCF and others have come up? They've gotten some of those players that Florida State used to get. But and what he did was he got out. He was looking for a way out, and not only did he get out, he got out for a whole lot of money.
Yeah,
he left Florida State with a bad situation. So yeah, I think he gets the pass every time. And no, I don't think he did a good service to Florida State at all. I think he tried to make himself different from Bobby Bowden just so he wouldn't have that pressure. And I think it backfired on him. And I think he alienated a lot of the fan base, and the culture got really bad there. And I say poor Willie Taggart. I think he's done a good job of coming in and trying to put out such a big dumpster fire.
Yeah,
and you got to give him a little time to do that.
Yeah, and of course, I think the Jameis Winston thing, and some of the former coaches said that was the beginning of the end with him coddling him. And one of the coaches said at the end they had one mandate, and that was get the players eligible, not get them to graduate, not move them toward a degree, but simply to keep them eligible. Another quick statement. Get your thoughts on it. NBA changing. I'm sorry. NBA Adam Silver going from owners to governor. And thoughts on this as relevant, any sense, any teeth to it at all?
I think it's just a crazy move to change the terminology from something that it is to something that it's not. It makes no sense to me. You're not a governor of anything. A governor gives the definition of a governor is that you don't own the team. You have been placed in a position of authority by an election. And I don't think any of those people who own those NBA teams have been placed in authority by any type of election.
Right.
I think it's a knee-jerk reaction to something that a player said in a racially charged environment. The NBA, predominantly African-American players, predominantly white owners, and someone said something, and we've had these owners who shoved or pushed somebody or been racially slurred players or people who own a stake or small stakes screaming. You got dumb people in every place in America who still try to whip up this racially charged. You got white people, African American people on both sides who push this agenda And I think then what happens is you get some knee-jerk reactions to change the name. That's not going to make a difference. If you
Hey,
want to change the racial divide in the NBA, then do something about the coaches who are predominantly white. Why aren't we looking at the African American coaches that are great coaches or are great leaders to be in the hierarchy of the CEOs and leading the charge? That's what we need to be doing and change it that way. You got African American players that are making millions of dollars and they want to equate themselves as a slave. If I was I'm not African American, so I don't think I can really speak on this subject, except to the point of I think that's a travesty.
you better believe it is.
If you want to make yourself out to be thinking you're some type of slave and you're making millions of dollars that way, I think this is a quick knee-jerk reaction to a problem. Yes, racial division is a problem, but you can't do that by changing the name of something and calling it something else. I mean, you can call me an airplane, and I can go out here and get in the hangar out here at the airport and put my arms out, but I'm never going to be an airplane. So you're never going to make an owner or a governor just by changing the name of it.
All right. I'm going to have James read Draymond Green's Twitter account as we go off the air to a commercial break. Listen to the guy who started this whole thing. Listen to his bio as we go off the air.
All right, fellas, once again, this is from @Money23Green, Draymond Green.
@Money, by the way.
Yes. Forward for the Golden State Warriors by way of Michigan State and Saginaw, Michigan. Also, DC, owner of Performance Inspired Nutrition.
All right. Coming back on the other side, we'll get DC's final thoughts on an O-line commitment and what he thinks about this offensive line at Alabama. We'll have that conversation in greater detail later on as we move throughout, maybe even next week with DC. For the Blitz, I'm Mark Houston. That's Jane Hardness, Aubrey Elmore. Coming back, we'll put the final touches on this edition. All right, back in with DC. DC, I'm not going to get to the O-line conversation. That's enough conversation for us to even if we talk about it a little bit on Blitz this week, we'll bring it back up with you on next week. Question that was running around yesterday. Love to get your thoughts on it. Ryan Fowler was asked by a Mississippi guy, what's the worst loss under the Nick Saban era? And I was thinking about that. I was like, well, I guess it's really based on how you describe worst. What's your candidate for the worst loss under Nick Saban?
Well, what I would have told that guy was, well, the good thing is we only got 21 to choose from. That's what I was told.
That's pretty good.
I think Ryan to come back with that. Well, we only got 21 to choose from, so it's not very hard to choose. I think my top three. I think the worst loss in the career is probably the worst loss and the best loss, and that was Louisiana Monroe in 2017. I think that because we shouldn't have lost that game.
You can't steal my thunder. Go ahead, though. I'll let you.
We lost to a team that we should have never been beaten by. We should have never been that choice, but it was the worst loss, but it was the best loss because it was the game that let Coach Saban harp on the process and why you need to do the way he wants to do it.
Yeah.
I think one of my other top three would have to be Utah in the Sugar Bowl. It was the most unprepared. We weren't ready. I know we didn't have anything to play for, but that shouldn't have been an excuse. Discipline and commitment should have made us play better in that game. I think that was a bad loss. Then I think the kick six at Auburn was a bad loss just because of the way we should have won the game and should have put the game away a lot sooner than that. It shouldn't have come down to that. So,
yeah, that's interesting.
Those are my top three.
I have four, and mine, La Monroe, for the exact same reason. At the time, it was the worst loss ever. Now, looking back, it's the best loss Alabama's probably ever suffered at any point. The Auburn to end the three in a row run, and then Clemson with the 1 second, and Clemson beat down both of those kind of because it was national championships on the line, kind of tie for me. But DC, tell our listeners what you got coming up. We're getting close to DC going back live. Tell our listeners real quick where they can find you and follow you.
Oh, yeah. DCCapstoneReport.com, David Cott 50, that's DAVIDCOT 50 on Twitter. You can check us out at RollTideBama.com, FreelancePictures.com. Lance has got a lot of great things up while we're going to be on hiatus. Coming right after the 4th of July, we'll be getting ready for our SEC Media Days, and then just previewing the team getting ready to go on in. And I can't go off the air without talking about Alabama basketball. Check out that video I tweeted this week of the workout. Hey, this Alabama basketball team is doing something more than just shooting basketballs, guys. I'm excited about what's coming this year.
All right, that's DC Capstone Report at David Cott 50 at David Cott 50 DCCapstoneReport.com. Catch up with you next week, DC.
Thank you. You have a great week, Martin.
All right, I'm Martin Houston. That's James Hardy. That's RB Elmore. This is the Blitz. Remember this: trust in the Lord always. Lean not your own understanding. All your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. Up next, Inside the Locker Room with Wimp and Barry Sanderson.
Thank you for listening to the hardest